Never heard of the Jaguar XJ220 V12 AWD? Yeah, neither has anyone else, and there's a damn good reason for that. What if I told you that in 1989, Jaguar came within inches of building the most technologically advanced supercar the world had ever seen? A twin-turbo V12 all-wheel drive monster that would have made the Ferrari F40 look like a go-kart. And yet, it never saw the light of day. The XJ220, you know, the one with the EV6, that was Plan B, or maybe Plan C. Hell, by the time they were done compromising, it might have been Plan Z. But the original concept, that was something else entirely. That was the car that would have changed everything. I've always been fascinated by the cars that almost were. The ones that got axed at the last minute, victims of bean counters, regulations, or just plain bad timing. But the original XJ220 concept hits different. This wasn't just another canceled project, this was Jaguar swinging for the fences, trying to build something that would have made the McLaren F1 look conservative. See, back in the late 80s, the supercar world was experiencing a renaissance. Ferrari had the F40, Porsche was cooking up the 959, and even Bugatti was trying to resurrect itself with the EB110. Everyone was pushing boundaries, seeing who could build the fastest, most advanced machine on four wheels. And Jaguar? Well, Jaguar was watching from the sidelines, nursing a gin and tonic, and reminiscing about the glory days of the D-Type. That's when a group of engineers decided enough was enough. They called themselves the Saturday Club, which honestly sounds more like a drinking society than a skunkworks operation. But these guys meant business. Jim Randall, the chief engineer, had this crazy idea. What if they took everything Jaguar knew about racing, everything they learned from Group C, and crammed it into a road car? The plan was gloriously insane. Start with the V12 from the XJR9 race car. Not the boat anchor from the XJS, mind you, but the proper racing unit. 6.5 liters of British Fury with not one, but two turbochargers strapped to it. The target? 700 horsepower. In 1989, when most supercars were happy with 400. But here's where it gets interesting. They weren't content with just massive power. No, that would be too easy. They wanted all-wheel drive too. Because apparently, putting 700 horsepower through just the rear wheels seemed boring to them. Can you imagine? These madmen looked at what was already an engineering nightmare and thought, you know what this needs? More complexity. The AWD system they had in mind wasn't some crude setup either. We're talking about a sophisticated torque vectoring system that could shuffle power between all four wheels depending on conditions. Think modern Nissan GT-R levels of sophistication, but designed when the most advanced computer most people had seen was a Commodore 64. Now you're probably thinking, this sounds too good to be true. And you'd be right to be skeptical. But they actually built it, or at least they built something close to it. The concept car unveiled at the 1988 Birmingham Motor Show had all of this, the V12, the AWD, the whole 9 yards. It was painted in that gorgeous silver, sitting low and wide like a Le Mans racer that had escaped onto the street. The response was incredible. Orders started flooding in immediately. Rock stars, oil sheiks, captains of industry, everyone wanted one. Jaguar announced a limited production run of 350 cars at $361,000 each. That's about $900,000 in today's money, and they sold out instantly. So what went wrong? Well, everything. Absolutely everything. Let's start with the engine. That glorious V12 from the race car. Turns out it wasn't exactly emissions friendly. Who could have guessed that a motor designed to run flat out at Le Mans might struggle to pass California smog tests? The engineers tried everything. Catalytic converters the size of beer kegs, fuel injection systems so complex they needed their own manual. Nothing worked. The homologation requirements were brutal. This was right around the time when governments worldwide were cracking down on emissions and safety standards. The original V12 produced so much heat, it literally melted the rear bumper during testing. I'm not making this up. They had a car so powerful, it was essentially self-immolating. But wait, it gets better. Or worse, depending on your perspective. The all-wheel drive system added 300 pounds to an already porky car. The complex differentials and transfer cases needed constant cooling, which meant more radiators, more plumbing, more weight. By the time they'd finished adding all the necessary hardware, the car weighed as much as a Range Rover. Then, there was the small matter of the transmission. Finding a gearbox that could handle 700 horsepower in AWD in 1989 was like finding a needle in a haystack, if the haystack was on fire. And the needle didn't exist. They considered everything from modified Group C racing transmissions to bespoke units that would have cost more than most complete cars. The suspension was another nightmare. With AWD, you couldn't just bolt on some coilovers and call it a day. The whole system needed to be redesigned from scratch. Anti-dive geometry, anti-squat, managing weight transfer with power going to all four wheels. It was a physics equation that would make Stephen Hawking sweat. Meanwhile, costs were spiraling out of control. Every solution created two new problems. Fix the cooling and you've added weight. Reduce the weight and you've compromised safety. Meet safety standards and you've killed performance. It was an engineering death spiral. By mid-1990, reality was setting in. The project was hemorrhaging money faster than a Vegas casino. TWR, Tom Walkinshaw's racing outfit that was helping with development, came back with revised projections. To make the V12 AWD work, they'd need another 2 years and roughly the GDP of a small nation. That's when someone had a brilliant idea. Or a terrible one, depending on how you look at it. What if they simplified things just a bit, maybe lose the AWD, and perhaps, just perhaps, swap the V12 for something a little more manageable? Enter the Metro 6R4 engine. Yes, you heard that right. The engine from a Group B rally car that looked like a mutant hatchback. But here's the thing. It was actually a brilliant little motor. 3.5 liters, twin turbo, compact, and relatively easy to make road legal. Sure, it was a V6 instead of a V12, but it could still make 540 horsepower. The purists were horrified. Imagine ordering a V12 supercar and getting a tarted up rally engine instead. It would be like ordering champagne and getting Prosecco. Sure, it'll still get you drunk, but it's not quite the same, is it? But Jaguar didn't have a choice. It was either the V6 or nothing at all. They tried to soften the blow by claiming the V6 was actually better. More efficient, they said, better weight distribution, more reliable. All true, technically, but nobody spending $300,000 on a supercar gives a damn about fuel efficiency. The decision to go rear-wheel drive only was equally controversial, but again, what choice did they have? The AWD system was too complex, too heavy, too expensive. Plus, with only 540 horsepower instead of 700, maybe you didn't need power going to all four wheels. Maybe. When the production XJ220 finally appeared in 1992, it was a shadow of its original concept. Oh, it was still fast. Bloody fast. It briefly held the production car speed record at 200 out of 13 mph, but it wasn't the technological tour de force it was supposed to be. It was a compromise. A very fast compromise, but a compromise nonetheless. The real tragedy is what could have been. Imagine if Jaguar had somehow made it work. A 700 horsepower, all-wheel drive supercar in 1992. It would have predated the McLaren F1, made the Ferrari F40 look antiquated, and established Jaguar as a serious player in the supercar game. Think about the timeline here. The Bugatti Veyron didn't arrive until 2005, that's 13 years later. The XJ220 V12 AWD would have been doing in 1992 what the Veyron did in 2005. All-wheel drive, massive power, cutting-edge technology. Jaguar would have been over a decade ahead of the curve. The ripple effects could have been enormous. Maybe Jaguar would have continued developing supercars instead of retreating to luxury sedans. Maybe the British automotive industry would have had a different trajectory. Maybe we'd be talking about Jaguar the way we talk about Ferrari or Lamborghini today. But perhaps the most frustrating part is that the technology did eventually become feasible. Fast forward to today, and 700 horsepower AWD supercars are almost commonplace. The new Ferrari SF90 makes 1,000 horsepower with a twin-turbo V8 and electric motors. The Porsche 918, McLaren P1, LaFerrari, they all use variations of the formula Jaguar tried to pioneer. Modern engine management systems could have solved the emissions problems. Current AWD technology with electronic differentials and torque vectoring would have made the system lighter and more efficient. Even the transmission issue would be trivial today. Hell, you could probably order a suitable dual-clutch gearbox from ZF's catalog. It makes you wonder what would have happened if Jaguar had just held on a little longer, if they'd found a way to make it work, even if it meant selling the car at a massive loss. Sometimes being first is worth more than being profitable. Ask Toyota about the Prius. There's a parallel universe somewhere where the XJ220 V12 AWD made it to production. In that universe, Jaguar is mentioned in the same breath as Ferrari and Porsche when people talk about legendary supercars. The leaping cat badge carries the same weight as the prancing horse or the raging bull. Instead, we got the V6 car, which, to be fair, wasn't bad. It was actually quite good. But it wasn't revolutionary. It wasn't the game changer it was supposed to be. It was a very fast, very expensive Jaguar that most people have forgotten about. The customers who put down deposits were offered the chance to back out when the specifications changed. Many did. Some sued. The whole thing turned into a legal nightmare that dragged on for years. Jaguar's reputation in the supercar market was ruined before it had properly begun. Only 275 XJ220s were built in the end. They're collector's items now, worth serious money. But they're collected more as curiosities than as landmarks of automotive achievement. They're the car that could have been something special but ended up being merely good. I saw one at a car show recently. Gorgeous thing. All curves and aggression. But knowing what I know about the original concept, I couldn't help feeling a bit sad. It's like looking at the Mona Lisa and knowing Da Vinci originally planned to paint a full-body portrait. What you're seeing is beautiful, but it's not complete. The real kicker? Some madman in England is actually building what Jaguar couldn't. There's a company that takes original XJ220s and retrofits them with V12 engines and all-wheel drive. It costs an absolute fortune and probably voids every warranty known to man, but they're doing it. 30 years too late, someone is building the car Jaguar should have built. It uses a modified version of the V12 from a late model XJS, twin turbocharged to around 650 horsepower. The AWD system is adapted from a modern Nissan GTR. It weighs about 200 pounds more than the original V6 car, but with the extra power and traction, it's supposedly much faster. 0 to 60 in under 3 seconds. Top speed estimated at over 230 mph. Is it the same as a factory XJ220 V12 AWD would have been? Of course not. It's a retro mod. A what if made real by someone with too much money. And not enough sense. But the fact that someone is bothering to build it tells you everything you need to know about the appeal of the original concept. The whole saga is a perfect encapsulation of the British car industry in the early 90s. Grand ambitions, genuine innovation, but ultimately undone by poor planning and worse execution. It's heartbreaking and hilarious in equal measure. Only Jaguar could design a car too advanced to actually build. You have to admire the audacity, though. In an era when most manufacturers were playing it safe, Jaguar went completely bonkers. They tried to jump straight from building stodgy sedans to creating the world's most advanced supercar. It's like a pub band deciding their next gig should be at Wembley Stadium. The Saturday Club engineers deserve credit for dreaming big. Jim Randall and his team genuinely believed they could pull it off. They weren't trying to build a profit center or a marketing exercise. They wanted to build the best car in the world, full stop. That kind of ambition is rare in the car industry, then or now. Maybe that's the real tragedy. Not that the XJ220 V12 AWD failed, but that manufacturers rarely try anything that ambitious anymore. Everything is focus grouped and market research to death. Nobody takes moonshots because moonshots are expensive and shareholders hate expensive. But imagine if they'd succeeded. Imagine if Jaguar had somehow found a way to make it work. We might be living in a very different automotive landscape. One where British supercars are a thing. Where Jaguar is synonymous with cutting-edge performance instead of wood-trimmed luxury. The technology they were attempting to develop would have filtered down to other cars eventually. AWD sports cars might have become common a decade earlier. Sophisticated traction management systems could have saved lives. The automotive world might have been pushed forward faster. Instead, we got the compromised car. The one that was fast, but not revolutionary, good but not great. It did hold the production car speed record for about a year, which is something. But it should have held it for a decade. It should have reset everyone's expectations about what a road car could be. The environmental regulations that killed the V12 weren't going away, though. If anything, they've gotten stricter. Maybe Jaguar was just ahead of their time in the wrong way. They were trying to build tomorrow's car with yesterday's technology and today's regulations. It was never going to work. But God, what a glorious failure it was. The ambition, the engineering madness, the sheer bloody-mindedness of trying to cram a Group C engine into a road car. It's the kind of thing that makes you fall in love with cars all over again. Not because it succeeded, but because someone was crazy enough to try. These days, Jaguar is all about electric vehicles and sustainable luxury. The I-Pace is a fine car, but it's not going to set anyone's soul on fire. It's sensible, responsible, appropriate for the times. Everything the XJ220 V12 AWD wasn't. Sometimes I wonder if we've lost something along the way. The willingness to be ridiculous, the courage to fail spectacularly, the belief that making something amazing is more important than making something profitable. The XJ220 V12 AWD had all of that in spades. It remains one of history's great automotive what-ifs, up there with the mid-engine Corvette that took 50 years to arrive, or the Chrysler turbine car that almost went into production. These are the cars that remind us that the automotive industry used to dream bigger, even if those dreams didn't always come true. Would the XJ220 V12 AWD have actually been any good to drive? Who knows? With that much power and 1990s traction control, it might have been a complete handful. It might have killed more customers than it impressed, but damn it, at least it would have been interesting. That's what bothers me most about modern supercars. They're all so competent, so capable, so boring. You can drive a 1,000 horsepower hypercar to the grocery store. Where's the drama in that? Where's the sense that you're wrestling with something barely contained? The original XJ220 concept promised to be a proper monster. The kind of car that would try to kill you if you showed it any disrespect. 700 horsepower, primitive AWD, and probably the aerodynamics of a brick. It would have been terrifying, and therefore magnificent. We'll never know for sure. All we have are the drawings, the rumors, and that one prototype that may or may not have had the full V12 AWD setup. Jaguar isn't talking, and most of the engineers involved have scattered to the wind. The Saturday Club's dream died in a conference room somewhere, murdered by spreadsheets and regulations. But the dream lives on, in a way. Every time a manufacturer announces some crazy hypercar concept, I think about the XJ220 V12 AWD. Every time someone pushes the boundaries of what's possible, even if they fail, they're following in its tire tracks. Sometimes the cars that never were are more important than the ones that made it to production. The homologation requirements that killed it seem almost quaint now. Modern manufacturers deal with far stricter regulations and still manage to build insane performance cars, but they also have 30 years of additional experience and technology. Jaguar was trying to do the impossible with slide rules and stubbornness. In the end, maybe it's better this way. The XJ220 V12 AWD remains perfect in our imagination. It never had the chance to disappoint, to break down, to catch fire in someone's garage. It exists in that wonderful space between dream and reality where all things are still possible. The V6 car that actually got built, it's a footnote now. A trivia question for car nerds. How many people even remember it exists? But the V12 AWD that never was? That's a legend. That's the one people still talk about, still wonder about, still try to recreate in their sheds. And that perhaps is the most fitting tribute to the Saturday Club's ambition. They aim so high that even their failure is more memorable than most manufacturers' successes. They tried to build tomorrow's car yesterday, and even though they failed, they showed us what might have been possible. So here's to the Jaguar XJ220 V12 AWD, the supercar that was too impossible to homologate, too advanced for its time, too ambitious for its own good. It never turned a wheel in anger, but it pushed the boundaries of what people thought was possible. And sometimes that's more important than actually succeeding. The automotive world needs more failures like this. More engineers willing to risk everything on a crazy idea. More companies willing to bankrupt themselves in pursuit of excellence. Because even when they fail, even when the bean counters win, they leave behind something valuable. They leave behind the knowledge that someone tried, that someone cared enough to attempt the impossible. And who knows? Maybe someday, someone will finish what the Saturday Club started. Maybe there's an engineer out there right now looking at the old blueprints, thinking about modern technology, wondering if it could be done. Maybe the XJ220 V12 AWD will finally see the light of day, 35 years late, but better than never. Until then, we'll have to content ourselves with what might have been, with the specs that seem impossible even today, with the knowledge that once upon a time, Jaguar swung for the fences and came up just short. It's a better story than most success would have been anyway, because in the end, the cars we remember aren't always the ones that made it. Sometimes they're the ones that didn't, the ones that pushed too hard, dreamed too big, failed too spectacularly. The Jaguar XJ220 V12 AWD is the greatest supercar that never was, and maybe that's exactly what it was meant to be.